Hello and welcome to this overview of the Biology Honors Program. My name is Tim Brennan. I'm one of the two biology teachers, and on behalf of Vanessa Kramer and Jen Stainton and Patty Murray, I want to thank you for spending some time to find out a little bit more about this program. During this presentation, we'll talk a little bit about the rationale for this program, the hopeful outcomes of the program, how students can earn the biology honors distinction, and the way in which the distinction will be measured by looking at standards. Well, the rationale for this program begins with the decision last spring to no longer offer a biology honors section along with a traditional biology section. And the reason for the elimination of that section was driven by some core principles. Our district is committed to equity and opportunity, and we were finding that there were very different experiences that students had in those two sections, and we felt that we were not supporting our core principles. That decision was applauded by some and challenged by others, particularly those students who were looking forward to increased opportunities and challenge of a biology honors section. In response, as a department, we decided to sit down and think about our core principles and how we could use those to actually provide a biology honors path within a traditional biology course. So it's worth, I think, going through these three principles and practices that we've published in the syllabus right here. The first principle being that all students should receive high-quality, rigorous instruction in a purposeful environment with equal access to science standards. I think this principle speaks loudly and clearly about the issues of equity and opportunity that we hold so dearly. And the practice then is that we wound up creating a common experience of biology where all students are held to high expectations. In other words, a section of biology as opposed to biology and biology honors. The second principle is that we have an obligation to support the needs of a diverse community, including those who wish to challenge themselves. And so we created this honors challenge path inside the course as a response to community feedback and discussion. And then finally, as another issue of equity and opportunity, the principle we hold is that any student should be eligible to achieve the honors distinction. And so in practice, what that means is that this course will be earned at the end of the course and is available to all students. Let's take a look for a moment at the outcomes. If a student is successful at achieving the biology honors distinction, what are the outcomes of this effort? And listed, I believe, from most important to least important, are these three benefits here. The personal benefit of the student that achieves this will be an enhanced learning experience, that they'll understand biology at a deeper level. They will understand more biology than they would have if not pushed in this particular way, and I think that their experience will just be a richer one. Secondly, by designating the course as biology honors on the transcript, that's likely to be an attraction to colleges and universities and help to set students apart when it comes time to, say, look ahead to applying to colleges. And finally, it is the fact that at Woodstock Union High School, honors courses carry an additional 5 points on a final grade, which obviously has an impact on a student's GPA. Interestingly, a student does not have to identify themselves as seeking the honors designation. They simply will do their work, and at the end of the year, the teachers will establish through some criteria whether or not a student will have the honors designation or not. And that decision is sort of summarized here. Students who will earn the honors designation will have achieved a score of 90% or better, an average of 90% or better on their summative assessments that will happen at various times in all 4 quarters. They will also have maintained a 90% or better in a category of assignments we're calling habits of work, which are often linked to things like timeliness and participation and effort. And then as an interesting piece here, we have a third category of assessments we're calling formative assessments. And while these assessments will count towards a student's grade, they won't be included in the determination of the honors designation. To get a little sort of educationally wonky here, formative assessments are essentially assessments that teachers use not to truly grade a student, but to sort of get a sense of student understanding. And formative assessments are often used to establish whether or not a class can move forward, or if a class is struggling, or what kind of remediation or next steps a teacher may need to take with a group. Formative assessments often are not graded in terms of how correct or authentic the responses are, but rather are graded by a sense of effort and participation. So we don't want the honors designation to just be about effort. We want it to truly represent a student's insight and mastery. And also, we also use formative assessments when students are kind of in the middle of figuring things out, and we don't want to hold sort of a poor grade on some formative assessment against a student in terms of achieving the honors designation. So having discussed a little bit the habits of work and the formative assessment categories, I think it is important for us to take a look at this important category that we're calling summative. Summative assessments are often end of instruction assessments that are linked to performance expectations. That's a phrase that's taken directly from the Next Generation Science Standards, and those are our content learning goals in biology, the life science Next Generation Science Standards. These performance expectations, I'll show you a couple of them in a minute, but they are important concepts that students should be able to demonstrate at the end of an instructional cycle, and you'll see that they are about action and using information as opposed to just simply declarative statements of knowledge. In addition, some of the summative assessments will be linked to the science and engineering practices that are so essential to the creation of a rich science experience at the high school level. And we'll look at some of those in a minute as well. Here's a sample life science performance expectation that I've highlighted at the Next Generation Science Standard website. HSLS1-2 says, develop and use a model to illustrate the hierarchical organization of interacting systems that provide specific functions within multicellular organisms. I think you can see that is a challenging sentence, and certainly a challenge for students to turn into a demonstration of understanding. Our task as teachers is to kind of change that language from something that teachers feel comfortable with to something that students feel comfortable with, and we're developing that right now. But suffice it to say that it's not simply it's not simply a list of information, but rather, to a creation of a product that students will be challenged to provide, and that they're going to have to sort of make some meaning out of the interacting systems in a body. So we're going to be working towards that. That's going to take us several weeks to move towards. And one very sort of handy benefit of these science standards is that each science standard has, and I'll try to highlight that here, an assessment boundary. So here you see it says the assessment boundary, that the assessment does not include interactions and functions at the molecular or chemical reaction level. Well, that's wonderful and helps to set the sort of expectation of what, say, being proficient at this standard might be. But if we're asking students to distinguish themselves in some way, then perhaps it's reasonable for us to ask students to go beyond this boundary, and indeed to provide some insight as to the interactions and functions at the chemical and molecular level. So we're going to be using these boundaries as a way to see which students are willing to dig in and find out more and understand at a deeper and more profound level a variety of these performance expectations. I also mentioned the science and engineering practices that come from the next generation science standards, and this is Appendix F of the NGSS, and if we scroll down just a little bit, we can see the 8 science and engineering standards that we've adopted, in fact adopted several years ago as a way to kind of drive our practice in our science classrooms. So you can see there they flow from asking questions or defining problems into developing and using models, planning and carrying out investigations, analyzing and interpreting data, using mathematics and computational thinking, and so on. Okay, these we believe are wonderful practices for students to develop. If we are really doing our jobs well, then students should be doing these kinds of things frequently in our classroom, and their work should be demonstrating that these are habits of theirs. So some of the summative assessments will not necessarily be content specific, but they'll be ways for us to kind of gauge how well developed these particular practices are. I hope that you've found this tour through the Biology Honors Program to be informative and helpful. I want to thank you again for checking this program out, and if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to be in touch via email with either myself or Vanessa Kramer as we work our way through this program. Thank you again, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.